All right, good evening. We are sponsored for the month by two generous sponsors. We have a sponsor for the month, Michael Tzaidi, in honor of making his first forthcoming siyum with our amazing shul, Mesav's Horayos. It's going to be wonderful. Hatzlacha with making aliyah, and in honor of his late father, Zohar ben Ruvain alav shalom. And also, Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Moshe and Susie Feder, Le'ilu Nishmas, Mr. Feder's father, Aryeh ben Michael, whose yortzeit is today, the 15th of Elul. And Le'ilu Nishmas, Mrs. Feder's mother, Roiza Bas Simcha HaKohen, whose yortzeit is on the 18th of Elul. May the neshama have an aliyah. And also, this year is also sponsored by myself and my wife in memory of my father-in-law, Moshe Levik ben Pinchas. Okay, we are 2 lines up from the bottom on Gimel Amud Beis. Tanya, we learned in a brisa. What we were discussing is that our Mishnah talked about a circumstance where Beis Din ruled and then retracted. And then we were trying to figure out whether the person who follows Beis Din is responsible anyway, because after all, he might not have heard what Beis Din was saying. We're trying to figure out how could he not have heard if they collected the money from him, not collected the money. Remember, we talked about that, but that was the topic of conversation is if Beis Din makes a ruling and then they retract the ruling and somebody follows Beis Din's ruling, are they still responsible for their personal offering? So Tanya, we learned our brayso. Rabbi Meir Mechayev. Rabbi Meir says that once Beis Din retracts, then the individual is chayev. He's obligated. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says potter, that you are exempt because it's as though you are depending on Beis Din. Rabbi Elazar says safek. It is a doubt, right? Whether he was relying on himself, whether it's because of himself and it's his fault, or whether he's the Beis Din. So mishum simchus amru, in the name of simchus, they said totally, it's hanging, kind of hanging. Now, what's the difference between I don't know and we don't know and it's hanging? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says asham totally ikabeinahu. The question is, if somebody isn't sure if they committed an avera, right? They're supposed to bring a korban. If they know they did commit an avera, you bring a korban chatas, right? If you didn't commit an avera, you're exempt. Those were our 2 first choices. If you're not sure, that would be considered the safek circumstance. The safek circumstance, if you're not sure, bring an asham toli. That's the guilt offering that it depends, we're not sure. Bring that. That protects you from getting into trouble until you find out. But probably not going to find out what your reverse intention was. But you're going to bring that offering. Tolui means it's such a minor connection to the original court ruling, whatever, that you don't even have to bring a asham toli. You don't bring anything, right? So he's saying, we're not quite sure, but don't bring anything. Okay, so that's what that means. Reb Zera says, Mashal de Rabbi Elazar lamad davar davar. Rabbi Elazar will explain to you his point of view when he says safek. What is it like? What does it mean? La'adam she'achal safek chaylev safek shumon. Imagine a person eats and he doesn't know whether the thing that he ate was forbidden fats or permissible fats. V'no delo, and then he becomes aware that he ate this piece of meat that he doesn't know what it is.
Shouldn't he take it to shechet or a basin to let them?
You can't look at a piece of meat after in the package and know whether it's kosher, right? You can look at an animal and figure out whether it was shechted properly or not, but you can't know a piece of meat. You go and buy a steak from the store, right? Can't know. So he doesn't know. And I guess he couldn't know the difference between whether it's one kind of fat or another. I guess the steaks look similar. Shemevi asham, right? He's going to bring a korban asham in that circumstance. Velo miboy, l'man damar tzibur maisi. Now, according to the opinion, that it's not a question, according to the opinion that says that the congregation is supposed to bring it, so then maisi. So then he's going to bring, so according to tzibur maisi, de mifarsama milsa. In that circumstance, how could he possibly be unaware that the Beis Din retracted? Because they would have gone about trying to make a collection and he would have found out about it. Ella afilu mandamar Beis Din mivian. According to the opinion, even according to the opinion that says that Beis Din is going to bring the sacrifice, de lo mifarsama milsa, and therefore people wouldn't be publicizing it. Ihava sha'il havu amrule. The reality is that it's kind of his fault a little bit because he could have asked somebody and found out, right? And he didn't. Therefore, we're kind of a little bit in between whether it's his fault or whether it's not his fault. Okay, so that's how that goes, and we're going to bring in Asham Tali. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Abin, v'yitim Rabbi Yossi bar Zavida. So Rabbi Yossi bar Abin, some says Rabbi Yossi bar Zavida, he gets into the act and he says, I'll give you a parallel. Mashal l'desumchas l'mad davar domeh. Now, what Sumcha says that it's not really connected. You don't even have to bring a korban asham. What's this like? What's that case like? That's like la'adam shehevi kapara so bein hashmashos. Imagine a person has to bring a sin offering, right? You have to bring it during the day. If you bring it at night, if your offering is brought at night, then it doesn't count. So what happens? You bring it to the base of Mikdash, it's getting late. They sacrifice it, and it's a little dark outside, but you don't know whether it's during the daytime, during the nighttime, right? So they didn't, the Zmanim app, it was during Bein Hashmashos in between. So it's in this doubtful circumstance. So, Safik mi ba'od yom nischaper lo, Safik mi shechashecha nischaper lo. We're not quite sure whether the offering was brought in the right time. She'ein mei ve'asham tov. You don't bring another korban after that. It's probably fine. It's close to being fine, and therefore you can rely on it enough and don't bring another korban. It's possible that you didn't get an atonement. But we're not going to bring another korban for that. Now, we're not saying that not only that he doesn't have to bring, according to the opinion that says that that the people are going to be paying for the korban when, for sure, it's sort of his fault because what he didn't pay attention, people were collecting. He didn't even check the guy's green certificate and find out what he was collecting for the korban asham that we all have to bring, the korban chatas we all have to bring.
You have a lot of Rishalchim out there. It's hard to pinpoint.
Okay, but he's okay. So that we said the Gemara yesterday, right? He could possibly have given without paying attention, right? Ella filaman damar tzibor meviin. Even according to the one that says the tzibor brings it, said then for sure everyone would know about it. He still doesn't have to bring. Why? Amrin lay dehacha besafik mi baon yod safik mi shechashecha. Ishael lo ashkach inish demishayele. Because at the end of the day, it's like the case where he doesn't know whether his korban was brought during the day or the night. Who are you going to ask? In other words, he's going to go over somebody and say, "What was my avera dependent on? Was I thinking of that, or was I thinking?" There's nobody to ask. So therefore, since there's nobody to ask, therefore he doesn't have to bring a korban.
Even the Kohen who were fast asleep at night?
They're not fast asleep. Not if they're bringing a korban.
Oh, you're talking about Kohen himself.
So now we're talking about the guy doing the avera. He's not going to bring a korban because we can presume that there's nobody to ask to be able to figure out his suffix. Okay, so that's why. Okay, Amar lo ben Azai. So ben Azai said, to the Mishnah says, right? This was this back and forth between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai in the Mishnah, right? Rabbi Akiva says if he stays at home, so then it is his fault. If he goes out on the road, it's not his fault. Ben Azai says if he's on the road, what is he supposed to do? And Rabbi Akiva says, yeah, that's like if he's at home, then he's supposed to know. What is this back and forth? It doesn't make sense. Maishna min hayoshev. So Ben Azai said, what difference does it make if he's, why should the traveler be not responsible? Why is he different than somebody sitting in his house? To which Rabbi Akiva says, what are you talking about? He's sitting in his house. Then he could find out the news. If he's traveling, he does not home. So then, Shapir Kamalei Rabbi Akiva le Ben Azai. That's a very good statement. Rabbi Akiva is explaining. You know why he doesn't know? Because he's not home. That's a very good point. What was Ben Azai thinking? So Amar Rava says, Hichsik b'derech yikabeinahu. The difference is not when the guy is traveling, but when the guy is in that moment where you're loading up your car and getting everything ready to go, that's the difference between the two of them. Ben Azai chayev. Deha bebeise. Ben Azai says you're home, right? Basically, the neighbor's going to come over and see you and tell you the stuff that's going on. So then he's bebeise isei. So he's got to say then, okay, then you should have known, and you're going to have to bring your own korban. Rabbi Akiva, Potter, you're exempt from bringing your own korban. You're relying on Basin, and you wouldn't have found out about the retraction. Why? Because your mind is already on the journey, right? You're not going back in and turning on the news and checking anything out. You're getting in your car and driving off.
Right. But you might want to check the weather to see you.
But you're not checking the Basin. Okay, next. Harulo based in La'akor es kol haguf. The next thing the Mishnah talked about that set was that if the basin uproots the entire mitzvah from the Torah, then that's not going to be a case of parhelam davar. Parhelam davar, the basin is only going to bring a korban if they pulled up part of it. Why? Because people shouldn't be relying on basin if they're uprooting an entire mitzvah in the Torah. Tana Rabbanan. So Rabbi says, v'nelam davar v'lo shiyakar mitzvah kula. Pasuk says that an item was hidden from the basin, not the entire mitzvah, right? That's not. Ketzad, for example, how so? So this is from our Mishnah. We said this. Amru ein nida b'Torah. The person if they say there's no such thing as nida in the Torah, ein Shabbos b'Torah. There's no Shabbos in the Torah. Ein avodos kochavim b'Torah. There's no prohibitions of idolatry in the Torah. Yachol yehu chayav, and you might think that based, and if people follow it, that the basin would be responsible for bringing this bull offering. Tamalomar v'nelam davar v'lo shetis alem mitzvah kula. You have to, not if a whole mitzvah is missing, the whole mitzvah, they're not going to bring a parlam davar for that. That doesn't count. Harelu Peturin. So therefore, this based in, if they ruled that erroneously, they're exempt, right? Aval, however, Amru Yesh Nida B'Torah, if they say there is Nida, Aval Haba al Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom Pater. But we said that if they suggest that there is no prohibition against a husband being with his wife on the non-Nida 11 days of the month, where if she has blood, so then she only has to keep one day pure opposite that day that she saw blood. So if they don't know that law, well, that's not clearly specified in the Torah. Nida, they say there is, but that law they don't. Then pater. Then a person. Then if a person at tzibur relies on basin for that, then they are exempt. Okay. 1 second. Where did I go? Just want to clarify something for myself. Pater. That's what it's okay. Right. If the basin's mistake is, right, the basin says that a shomer, I read it wrong, that haba shomer yom keneged yom is pater, right? Not that they are pater from the korban, right? If that's the ruling they say is that a husband who lives with his wife during that time is exempt, that is going to be the sort of thing they're going to be chayav. They're going to bring their korban. That's what was confusing me. The word pater. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. If they say there is Shabbos, but they say if somebody carries from a private domain to a public domain, then he's exempt. Then that's a prohibition that is enough to make them liable for the parlam davar. If the most of the congregation follow it, there is idolatry in the Torah. But if you bow down, that's exempt. So you might think that the basin might not be responsible for those kinds of averos. Taman Lomer, the pasuk says, "V'nelam davar," right? That they forgot a part of the avera. Velo kol guf, not the entire thing. Okay, so Amar Mar, we said Yachlu Yehu Pturin. So we said you might think that they are exempt. Ibekio miktas ubito miktas Pturin ubikaras kol aguf Pturin. I don't understand that line in the Mishnah. You started off and you said that if they uproot the entire mitzvah, then they're not going to bring a parlam davar. They're exempt from it. Then you said, you might think that if they uprooted part of it, they'd also not be liable. Well, then when would they be liable? You've just taken out all the circumstances. We know the Torah says they're liable sometime. So how would that be? They're chayavin. Where's the part where basin would be liable then? So Tana hachi kakashle. This is what the Tana meant to ask. This is what he was saying. Ema davar kula milsa mashma. You might have thought that the word davar in the pasuk that says that they got a thing hidden means the entire thing. That means the entire mitzvah. So therefore, Tamalomer, therefore the pasuk says, V'ne'elam davar, that a part of it was hidden. My mashma, so what does that mean? So Amar Ula, Kari Bey V'ne'elam, so therefore he says, Tamalomer, V'ne'elam davar. Therefore, V'ne'elam davar, only part of the thing, not the whole thing. Okay, fine. Now, my mashma, so how do you see from the pasuk V'ne'elam davar that it means part of a thing? Right? Davar means a thing. So we're interpreting davar means that part of the mitzvah, not the whole mitzvah. So Menelam dar, my mashma, Amar Ula says, Kari Bey Venelam mi davar. What you have to do is you have to read the pasuk as though what it means, to translate it as some of the thing was hidden. Right? Venelam davar means it was hidden from the thing, right? This part of the aver was hidden from the thing. Chizkiah says that's not the interpretation, how you learn it. It says, the pasuk says, Amar Kra, V'asu achas mikol mitzvos. The pasuk says that you do one from amongst one of these mitzvos. That means mikol mitzvos velo kol mitzvos. It has to be from a part of the mitzvah, not the whole mitzvah. Mitzvos tarti mashma. Okay, well, the pasuk says you are doing from the mitzvos, plural, which means that it sounds like Basin has to be doing from two mitzvos. Well, a part of two mitzvahs is one mitzvah, which would be the entire mitzvah. So why don't you interpret it that way? So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak explains mitzvahs ksiv. It's written with only one vav, which is singular. Mitzvahs is singular, so therefore it means from amongst one mitzvah, which means part of a mitzvah. Ravashi says, Yalif davar mizakin mamre. I have a different way of knowing that davar means. That davar is the same word that's used when it talks about a zakin mamre, rebellious sage. By him it says, B'zakin mamre, ki yipale mimcha davar, if something will be hidden from you, lo tasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yaminu smol. Do not turn away from the thing that he says to you to the right or to the left, from Beis Din. So now, ma mamre min hadavar velo kol davar, the zakin mamre, we know, he can't uproot the entire mitzvah. He has to be arguing in a part of the mitzvah. Af behora, so too, therefore, that's the same ruling here. Davar velo kol haguf. It's only part of the mitzvah, not the entire thing. Okay, so therefore, that's what we know our Mishnah. We're arguing about what the source is, but our Mishnah is there's no real argument in the halacha. Part of the mitzvah, not the whole thing. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Ein beisin chayavin ad sheyoru bedavar she'ein hatzdukin modin bo. Another important part of what Beis Din's mistake has to be, it has to be a credible mistake, right? So incredible mistake so far, number one is, they say there's no Shabbos. Nobody's going to buy that and say they're relying on that. If they make a mistake in something that you can open a pasuk and read it directly inside, that's also not a mistake that people should be relying on. And the way that they phrase that is the Tzedukim. The Tzedukim never relied on oral traditions. So the Tzedukim only relied on what was written most literally in the Torah. If the Beis Din contradicts the literal words of the Torah, that can't be something that people would follow, right? So, because all along we've been saying it sort of depends on the individual who's hearing what Beis Din said, whether you can consider him fooled by Beis Din, right? If he's an elder himself, he can't rely on them. Even a regular person who couldn't rely on a Beis Din if they're making a mistake in something that Tzedukim would say. Aval bedavar shatzdukin modin bo. If it's something that the Tzedukim would agree with, Turin, then that's going to be exempt. The Beis Din is going to be exempt from bringing their korban. My taima, what's the reason for that? Because zil kari beiravu. It's just go learn that in school. That's the basics, right? Anybody open a book and know that. Tanan. We learned in the Mishnah. Yesh nida b'Torah. It says in the Mishnah, there's nida in the Torah. Aval, habal shomeres yom keneged yom pater. But a mistake that could be reasonable is that if a husband has relations with his wife when she's shomeres yom keneged yom, following one day clean, one day impure. Okay, v'amai. Well, according to this new rule, why should that be? Shomeres yom keneged yom haksiv. It's written right in the Torah, this rule of one day. V'safra la, right? Pasuk says, and she counts. Milamed shesoferes echad leechad. She counts one day of clean when she sees blood on her non-nida days. So
didn't you take 7 days or something, or a week?
So the rule, we have to make sure not to get too confused, and I don't want to get too into Hilchos Nida because then we can spend the rest of this year. But nowadays, well, what's that? In the Torah, a woman who sees blood is tameh for 7 days as a nida, and she's tameh for 7 days no matter how many times she sees blood. Then, following 7 days, she goes into a zava period which is 11 days. During the 11 days, if she sees blood, it's not nida blood because the menstrual cycle should be longer than that amount of time.
It's the remnant of the...
It's not. Shouldn't be. It's blood that comes from a different source, and that blood is tameh as well. It's zava blood, but the rules are different. So if she sees blood one time, she only has to keep pure for 1 day. If she sees twice, then she's going to keep 7 clean days. She has to count 7 clean days. She's 3 times. Then she's bringing a korban. No, second time also 1 clean day. Third time she will count 7 clean days. Okay? But it's not the same thing. Zava and nida are nowadays confusing. Therefore, the chumrah that we've taken on is all bleeding, all blood. You count 7 days, and then you need 7 clean days afterwards anyway. So we take on the chumras of both. Okay, so don't get confused because when I'm talking about the one shomeres yom keneged yom, we don't have a shomeres yom keneged yom nowadays, but it's written right in the Torah. So the answer is Da'amri ha'ara sharya. The answer is, you know what mistake is not in the Torah? The question is, what constitutes relations with one's wife, right? Is it just the beginning of contact or the actual intercourse itself? So therefore, if Beis Din rules erroneously and they say that the initial contact is permitted, that's the mistake. So Gamar biyahu da asira, and they say the end, having real intercourse, that's what's prohibited. So hanam iksiv, that can't be a mistake that you can let Beis Din off the hook with that, let people off the hook with that, because that's also written right in the Torah. Es mikora ha'ara, right? That's once she reveals her mikor, then that's the prohibition. The beginning of touching is when the prohibition starts. Da'amri kedar. So what they say is Da'amri kedarka asira shelo kedarka sharia. The answer is maybe what they said was the prohibition is only having regular intercourse, but sodomy is permitted. Okay, now that's not true, but the pasuk doesn't say that. Oh, but the problem is the pasuk does say that. V'aksiv, the pasuk says mishkevei isha. All kinds of intercourse with a woman are prohibited during that time. So therefore, it doesn't work. Beis Din still can't make that mistake. All of these rules are written right in. So the answer is Da'amri kedarka aser afilu ha'ara shelo kedarka gemar biyahu da aser aval ha'ara sharia. The answer is they could be learning like this. They could say, if they're having regular relations, so then it's prohibited in any event, no matter what. But if they're having sodomy intercourse, so then that only is with the complete intercourse, not the beginning of intercourse. That the Torah doesn't necessarily specify.
What happens if you marry someone who was married before and she's no longer a nida?
People who are married, well, once somebody's not a nida, then they don't have to keep nida anymore, right? But at one point, once a woman's older, she's not a nida, then there's no issues, right? There's no prohibitions. So ihachi, if that's true, afila nida nami, if that's true, also a nida as well, right? Why did the Mishnah say a case of shomeris yom keneged yom? If the mistake that they're having is in what the definition of intercourse is, that's a same issue as a woman who's a nida too. So rather, let's go back and be simple. Liolam kedarka uda amri ha'ara be'isha davahi dichsiva. The answer is that they would have interpreted that this is regular relations. However, the idea that regular relations are prohibited even at the beginning contact phase, they might have thought that's prohibited for a nida. But a shomeris yom kineged yom, that's prohibited, that's permissible. So therefore, that's the mistake they made. Now, that is not clearly written in the Torah. And therefore, that's a mistake that people might rely on, and that's an example. V'bois ema, or else if you want, I will say, da'amri zava lo havya el biyamami. That maybe they might have made another type of mistake. They might have said that she's not a zava unless, right, she sees blood during the daytime. Because the pasuk says, kol yemei zova, all the days of her zava. So therefore, you don't have a problem of her being a zava at night. And therefore that could be a mistake. So there are detailed mistakes in shomeris yom keneged yom. That's what the Mishnah is suggesting. Okay, so now, Tanan, let's go back to the next case. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. There's Shabbos in the Torah of ahamotz rishus l'rishus pater, but carrying from one rishus to the other is exempt. Now, v'amai hotza haksiva lo sotziu masam mibatechem. How could you make that mistake? It's written right in the Torah. Torah says, don't take things out, don't take a burden out from your house. Da'amri, the answer is da'amri hotzahu da'aser hachnasa mutter. The answer is, one answer is, because the person might think taking something out from your house is prohibited, but bringing something from outside into your house, that's okay. Because Torah doesn't say that part. That would be a mistake.
Either way, it's prohibited.
Yes, but we're looking for an example of a law that's not explicitly stated in the Torah, that it would make sense that a person would follow Beis Din and make a mistake by following them, because it's not explicitly written in the Torah. V'bois amor, if you want to say to Amri Hotzah Hu Dasira, they would have said that carrying that is prohibited. However, Moshit V'Zorek Shari, but if you're dragging something or you throw something, that is okay, and that's not okay. So therefore, that's another example. Tanan, the third one in the Mishnah was Yesh avodas kochav b'Torah. There's avodah zarah in the Torah. Aval mishtach bepotter. But if somebody bows down, you're exempt. V'amai, why should that be? Hamishtach ve'haksiva. It's written right in the Torah. Somebody bows down to avodah zarah is prohibited. Pasuk says, Lo sishtach le'el acher. Don't bow down to any other gods. De'amri ki asira hishtachavaya kedarka. I might have thought that it's telling me that regular bowing down, that's what's prohibited. Aval shalo kedarka, but a non-normal bowing down. Sharia would be permissible. What's a non-normal bowing down? You don't spread out your hands and feet.
You can just go on one knee, but make sure it's not completely bent.
1 second. Hishtachava shalokadarka. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Hishtachava shalokadarka is when bowing to this idol is not the normal way of serving the idol. In other words, right, like we said, right? We said that bowing down is prohibited, sure, if you normally bow down to the other. But what if it's a merkulus, and normally it's not how you do? Is bowing down prohibited? That's subject to the Beis Din.
It could be Marasayan, either way.
It's not a Maris Ayin, because everybody knows the merkulus, but it's prohibited, it's usher anyway, because even the Torah doesn't say so, we have a drush that says so, right? So therefore, it's not explicit, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a detail that's not explicit. Okay. Now, v'boy say anywhere else if you want. The second answer is the one I was thinking of before. Da'amri hishtachavaya gufa kedarka hu de'asir de'is ba pishut yadayim v'raglayim ha hishtachavaya de'leis ba pishut yadayim v'raglayim lo. That if a person bows down and they spread their hands and feet, that would be bowing, and that's prohibited. But if a person bows without spreading their hands and feet, then that would not be sufficient to make you liable, and that would be a mistake on the part of the Beis Din.
When you bow to say Galinu,
that's right. And that's not full hishtachavaya in the sense, not like we bow on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Right.
Okay. Turning the page. Dalet on the base. Boy Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Ein charisha b'Shabbos mahu. Let's say a person says, there's no such prohibition on Shabbos as, let's say the Beis Din says, there's no such prohibition as plowing on Shabbos. What would be in the case there? Mi amrinon kevin de kamodu bekuluhu milsa kibitol miktsas v'kiyom miktsas dami. Since they're suggesting there's still other averos on Shabbos, there's still other 38 more malachos, so therefore that's uprooting only a part of the mitzvah, and therefore that disqualifies. Odilma kevin de akaryon lech lecharisha kol ikar kakiris guftami. Or you're uprooting the whole avera of plowing on Shabbos, and therefore that's uprooting the whole thing, and that doesn't count. So which is it? So Tashma, Yesh Nida Batorah Haba al Shomer's Yom Keneged Yom is Pater. The example the Mishnah said is that there's a Nida in the Torah, but Shomer's Yom Keneged Yom is not in the Torah. V'amai, why is that? Ha Akaryan l'Shomer's Yom Keneged Yom Kolikar. You're uprooting the entirety of the Shomer's Yom Keneged Yom. So Amalach Rav Yosef Shomer's Yom Amrinon Kedishnan. Well, we gave an explanation on the page before. We just said they're not uprooting the entirety of the Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. They were only uprooting the issue of the definition of intercourse for the sake of Shomeres Yom Keneged. So that's why it was only a detail. Tosh Yesh Shabbos b'Torah. Somebody says there's Shabbos Torah. But carrying from private domain to public domain is exempt. Now, why should that be? You're uprooting the entire carrying from the Torah. So the answer is Hasam Nami Kiddushin. We already explained that was the case where, remember, carrying is prohibited, but throwing was permitted, or taking out is prohibited, but bringing in is permitted. They weren't uprooting the entire thing.
If you're throwing it, you're still picking it up. When you pick it up, it's still carrying.
Gotta wait till to Masechah Shabbos, dude. I'm not going to argue on the details of Hotzah. Just going to tell you that throwing and carrying is not the same thing, and so carrying is written right in the Torah. Throwing is something that we can derive. Okay, so.
Good point, though. You have to pick it up, carry.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Toshma, come and listen. Yesh avodas kochavim baTorah. Right. If somebody says there is idolatry in the Torah, avah hamishtachav potter, but somebody who bows down is exempt. Now, v'amai ha'akaryon lihishtachavoya kol ikar. This is you're uprooting the entirety of bowing down. Then. So again, Amri yishtachava nami kiddushin. We explained. You weren't saying the whole right. We said it was the example of bowing down to an idol that you normally don't bow down to, or bowing down to in an unusual way. So, we in all those cases weren't proofs that we were uprooting the whole thing. So by Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera asked a fine question. Ein Shabbos b'shvius mahu. What if the person were to say, there's no such thing as Shabbos during a Shemitah year? What if that's, I'm not the person, Basin. What if Basin says that? Okay?
Then you go to a different basin because this basin's not reliable.
Okay. But the question that we're asking is that uprooting Shabbos, and so therefore it's not something that people should be fooled by, or is it uprooting only a part of it, and therefore it is? So, b'maito, how would they make such a mistake? Because the pasuk says, "Behadein kra." Look at this pasuk. "Becharishu bekatzir tishbos." You are going to rest from harvesting and plowing. Bisman deika charisha v'ika Shabbos. When there's a prohibition of when you're allowed to plow, you have to rest. Bisman deleka charisha like a Shabbos. When there's no plowing, there's no Shabbos. That's an interpretation of the pasuk. So, okay. Now, mi amrino kevin de mekaimin law b'shar shani shavua kibitol mixas v'kiyom mixas dami. Since they never said there's no such thing as Shabbos altogether, there's 6 other years of Shabbos, they're not really uprooting everything. Or maybe came into karyan le b'shvius kakirsa guf dami, since they're completely eliminating Shabbos during Shemitah year, that is eliminating Shabbos. Which way do you look at it? So Ravina says, Toshmakam, listen, Navi shenis nave la'akor davar midivrei Torah. If there's a Navi who prophesizes to uproot something, or somebody comes along and says, that book you don't need anymore, here's a New Testament, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. Chayiv, right? So then he's liable. Lebito mixas, likim mixas. But if he says to nullify part of it and to keep part of it, so Rabbi Shimon says potter, he'd be exempt, right? That's not where the prohibition is for him. The prohibition for a Navi Sheker is he's got to uproot a whole mitzvah. When it comes to idolatry, when it comes to idolatry, even if he says, you know what? It's permissible to worship that idol today. Tomorrow you can't, but today you can't. So he'd be liable. Now, Shema Mina, that shows you, what's he doing? He's not uprooting the entirety of idolatry, but he is uprooting the entirety of idolatry right now and today. That's considered uprooting it completely. Shema Mina, in Shabbos v'shviyas, kebitol mixas v'kiyom mixas dami, Shema Mina. So therefore, according to that opinion, one opinion is suggesting, right, that when it's only by the rule by avodas kochavim that's the rule, right? By idolatry, he's not uprooting the entire thing, but he's only uprooting it for certain days. That's going to be considered uprooting the entire thing, which means that if you uproot something at specific times and not at other times, that's normally not considered to be completely uprooting, and therefore we can there apply it to our case, that if the Beis Din says there's no Shabbos during Shemitah, that is not going to be a complete uprooting. Okay? And there could be a parallel davar for that circumstance. Yeah.
Okay.
Mishnah. Horu Beis Din v'yoda echad mehen shato. Beis Din taught it, but one of the members of the Beis Din knows there's a mistake going on. V'amar lehen tonatim. He gets up and he says, "You are mistaken," like Yehuda would, right? Yehuda said, right? So what would happen if Beis Din ruled this? Right. He would say, I would go to another Beis Din. Right? Yeah. This guy would do that. O shelo haya mufla shel Beis Din sham. Or, let's say the head of the Beis Din wasn't there that day, right? So then, O shahaya echad mehen ger o mamzer o nasin o zakin. Or, it was an illegitimate Beis Din because they had judges who are not allowed to be judges. Right? As we learned in Masechah Sanhedrin. Converts, we said, mamzers can't. A nasin is one of those converts that were from the Chivi tribes that tricked Yeshua, right? And an elder, right? Somebody who cannot have children. Zakin shelo roi lebanim. So all of those are people can't be participating on a Sanhedrin. If your Sanhedrin has that, they're an invalid Sanhedrin.
They got in through deceitful means? Is that
mistaken means, deceitful means, something like that? Yeah, an inappropriate basis, and they got assigned badly. Hareze Potter, they're not going to be liable for a par halam dover because they're not a valid basin. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Shenamar kind of says here Eidah, v'nemar lahalan Eidah. It says in 2 different places talking about the Eidah, which is one of the places. It's talking about. Give me a second, let's find where that pasuk is. It's a Gzera Shava of Eidah, right? It says by the par. It says here by the param davar, and the other one is about the halachos of a Sanhedrin. That's where it is. In B'midbar Lamed Hey, Chaf Daled through Chaf Hey. So that's talking about Sanhedrin, and it calls the Sanhedrin an Eidah, right? So therefore, Ma Eidah Hamura Lahalan Kulan Ru'in Lahora, just like you need a full Sanhedrin, ready full of appropriate members. Av Eidah Hamura Khan, so too, by the Par Ha'elam Davar, the Eidah that's talked about here is Achi Kulan Ru'in Lahora, you need a full Sanhedrin that are all full of appropriate judges. Says the Gemara. O Shalo Haya Mufla Shal Basin Sham. Mishnah said if the Mufla, the head of the basin, was not there. So Minol, and how do I know that is necessary? Some Rav Sheshes, or Sheshes says, V'chein Tana de Rishmal. We learned it in the Brisa of the Yeshiva Rishmal. Mimnei Amru Horu Badavar Shatstukin Modim Bopturin. What was the reason why we said that if Beis Din makes a mistake on something so simple that even the Tzedukim could have figured it out, that they are exempt from the bringing param davar? Because they should have just read the Torah and they didn't. They didn't learn enough. So lo haya mufla shel basin sham nami p'tur mipnei shehaya lehem lil mod v'lo lamdu. The answer is, if the head of the basin was there, then they would have learned something that they didn't know, and this wouldn't have happened. Right? He would have explained it to them. The fact that he wasn't there means they didn't follow through and learn to the best of their ability. So that's why. Nemar Sham Eidah v'Nemar Kan Eidah. We have the rules of Beis Din. It says Eidah, and here it says Eidah. Achi Kulan Roy Lahora. They all have to be appropriate for bringing a judgment. V'Hasami Nolan. How do I know over there when it's talking about the Beis Din calls them an Eidah, the Sanhedrin calls them an Eidah? How do I know that all of these things are prohibited? All of these qualifications are necessary. Damar Rav Chisda Amar Rav Chisda says, the pasuk says, "V'yisyatzvu sham imcha." They should stand there with you. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was told. They're going to stand there with you. Imcha b'domin l'cha. They have to be people who are similar to Moshe Rabbeinu in their yichus. Ve'ema imcha l'shchina. Maybe it doesn't mean their yichus. Maybe it means that they have to be worthy of receiving the shchina. Like they could be Nevi'im. Now, a Ger could be a Navi, right? He could be, there's no reason why he can't. Mamzer could be a Navi. Ella Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Amar Krop Pasuk says, V'nasu itcha b'dom ilcha. There's another pasuk there that says that they should engage in judgment with you, which means that they need to be similar to you to engage in judgment. Says the next Mishnah. Horu Beis Din, Shogegin, the Asu Kol Kahal Shogegin. If the Beis Din makes their mistake, negligence, and the community follows Beis Din through negligence, Mevi and Par, that's where they're going to bring this bull offering. Mezidin v'asu shogegin. If Beis Din intentionally makes the wrong law, and Beis Din and the call follows them, so then Mevi and Kisba Usira, then Beis Din can't bring a korban because they're not shogeg. Mm-hmm. But that means that everybody else who did the Avera is Shogeg, and they're not relying on Beis Din, therefore they have to bring their own korban. They're going to bring their own individual korban. Shogegin v'asu mezidin, if the Beis Din makes a mistake with Shogeg, but the people act inappropriately and they are mazid, harei elu p'turim, then nobody brings. Why? They can't bring because they're mazid. They did it on purpose. Beis Din can't bring because they only bring if the people acted based on what they said. So nobody acted based on what they said. So therefore there's no korban there. Says the Gemara. Shogegin v'asu mezidin, right? Let's say the Beis Din was shogeg, they were negligent, and they did it b'mezid. So then harei elu p'turin. That means the Mishnah says that is the example when everybody's exempt. So that means hashogeg dumya demezid chayev. If you had a case where the community acted negligently, but it was kind of like they acted intentionally, that would be liable. What are we talking about? How do you act negligently but like, right? Negligently means I relied on Beis Din. This is a negligent act without relying on Beis Din. That's essentially what we're saying. Hey chidami, how can they have a negligent act not relying on Beis Din? Shahoru Beis Din shechelef mutter v'dischalef lo b'shumin. Our old case, person of Beis Din says that forbidden fats are permitted, right? And he goes to the fridge to get himself some kosher shuman. Mm-hmm. And he accidentally pulls out the chelef, okay? And he eats it. V'achlo. So therefore, we said, that should say, according to this Mishnah, that you would be, in that circumstance, they'd be liable for their own offerings. Well, Lema Tifshot Ha Deboy Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama had that question a couple of days ago in Daf Beis. So let's say this answers, our Mishnah answers that question. So Amar Allah, he'll say to you, it doesn't answer his question because Mishum de Tana Reisha, since the beginning says Mezin Vasu Shogegin, it's just a balance in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if Beis Din did it on purpose and the people followed B'Shogeg, then the people are bringing their own korban. Tana Seifa, it balances and says the second part, Shogegin Vasu Mezidin, that if the Beis Din was B'Shogeg and the people were B'Mezid. It doesn't mean to imply that if Beis Din was B'Shogeg and the people were Shogeg, which was Mezid, that they would be liable for their own korbanos. No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean to prove anything. It's just a balance of language. Rami Rachama's question stands, and we had to deal with it back then. Next Mishnah. Haru Beis Din va'asu kol kahal, right? Beis Din taught this, and all of the nation follows it. Oruban, or at least majority, al pien, based on what they said. Mevian par, they're going to bring one bull. Ubavodos kochavim. Now, if the avera that they happen to rule on is idol worship, mevian par useir. They're going to bring a bull offering for their negligence of their ruling, and they're going to bring a goat offering, which is what's brought if they cause the community to do avodah zarah. So they bring both of those. Divrei Rabbi Meir, what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda says Yud Beis Shvatim mevian Yud Beis Parim. If the 12 tribes follow the Sanhedrin, then they are going to bring 12 offerings. Each community is going to bring their own. It's the responsibility of the community, it's not the responsibility of the Beis Din, in other words. Uba avodas kochavim, if the avera is avodas kochavim, Yud Beis Parim, Ushneim Asar Sirim, they're going to bring 12 bulls and 12 goats. We turn the page to Daf Hayim and Aleph. Rabbi Shimon says, Yud Gimel Parim. Rabbi Shimon says, no. His opinion is there are 13 cows being brought here. Why? Why? Because he says not only does each community bring one, but Beis Din also brings one. So it's 13. And avodas kochav, when it comes to the if they worship idolatry, shloshos apartments going to be 13 bulls, the Yud Gimel Seir and 13 goats. Par v'seir lekol shevet v'shevet, par v'seir lebeis din. One for each shevet and one for Beis Din. Horu Beis Din v'asu zayin shvatim. Let's say new case. Beis Din teaches it, and only 7 of the Shvatim have the majority of their people do it. Oruban, or the majority, right? All of the Shvatim did, or at least the majority of them, Alpiyam based on what Beis Din said. Mevi and Par, then each of those Shvatim are going to bring a bull. Ubavodos Kachav Mevi and Par V'Seir, and if it was idolatry, they're going to bring a bull and a goat. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Sorry, all of them are going to bring one. Sorry. Mevi and Par V'Seir, they're going to bring one. That's what Rabbi Meir says. Right? Once they're in the majority, so then that's going to be like everybody, but it's still only one korban, according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Zayin shvatim shechatu, if 7 tribes sin, meviin zayin parim, it's going to be 7 bulls. Ushar shvatim shalochatu, and you know what the other 5 also do that didn't do that? Meviin al yadayim par, they also bring for the other guys. So you're going to have 12 anyway. Okay? Sha'af elu shalochatu meviin al yadam chotin, right? Because the ones who didn't sin bring a korban chatos on behalf of the ones that did. So it doesn't matter. You don't get off because you didn't do the avera. It's a community offering issue. So your community is going to bring for those people.
No easy way out.
No easy way out. Rabbi Shimon says ches parim. He says 8 bulls, meaning only the 7 tribes that did the Averis are going to bring, plus not the other 5, plus 1 for Beis Din. The 8 bulls and the 8 goats. Par v'seir l'shchol shevet v'shevet, par v'seir lebeis din. 1 for each of the shvatim that did the Avera, and 1 for the Beis Din. Okay, Horu Beis Din shel echa min shvatim. Now, let's say the big Sanhedrin. It's not the Sanhedrin of 71. What happens if the Beis Din of that shevet makes a ruling? V'aso oso shevet al piem, and that shevet follows them. So oso shevet hu chayev. That shevet is obligated to bring a par helam davar. Ushar kol shvatim turin, but all the rest are exempt. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, that's because Rabbi Yehuda also held that in the case where it was the main Sanhedrin, then everybody brought, even the ones who didn't do the Averis. Now he's explaining it's only one shevet, nobody else is bringing. The Chacham said no. Ein chayavin ela Horayos based in Hagadol bilvad. If it's not the Sanhedrin, it doesn't apply. Par helam davar is a rule that only applies to Beis Din. To the Sanhedrin. So if the Beis Din of the Shevet makes the ruling, that doesn't count. Shnamar, because the pasuk says, "V'im kol adas Yisrael yishku v'lo adas oso Shevet." It has to be the Ada, the Beis Din of the entire Yisrael, not the Beis Din of that Shevet. Says the Gemara, Tanarabban. Everybody's learned. Yadu shahoru v'ta'u. They Beis Din knew that they taught, they made a mistake. V'ta'u mahoru, but they made a mistake and forgot which avera they permitted.
That's a big mistake.
I know, it's like Yehuda says, write it down. Somebody should write the stuff down.
Write it down that way.
So Yehuda was the guy who has the tab, makes sure to keep place. They didn't keep place. They forgot which was the thing they were discussing yesterday. We were discussing chilev, or we were discussing blood.
Or just keep this.
That's
in this
it.
place.
So
Simple solution.
Exactly. Good luck on that to the Beis Din.
So they didn't. So Yachol Yehu Chayavin. Okay, you might think, well, they know for sure that they taught it, and they know for sure that the people ate chaylev and they ate blood. They did the averos. So now the question is, shouldn't we know then that either way they should bring the korban? You might think they would be Talmud Lomar. The pasuk says, "V'nod hachatas." They know about their sin. V'losh yodu hachotin. Not that they know that the sin was done. They have to know which avera it was that they permitted. If they don't know, then they can't bring this par elam davar. Okay, you were just satisfied with that. That's good. That makes sense. Okay, then the pasuk says, "Asher chatu shnei shvatim mevi'in shnei parim." It says the ones that they sinned. So that means to tell us that if 2 tribes did the avera, then they're going to bring 2 bulls. Chatu shlosha, if 3 tribes do it, maybe in shlosha they're going to bring 3. O eno omer ella chatu shnei yechidim, maybe in shnei parim, chatu gimel, maybe in gimel. Or maybe that pasuk isn't talking about communities at all. Maybe it's saying that if based on rule and 1 person did it, then they are going to bring their own personal korban. 2 people did it, they bring their own personal korban. Talmud Lomar, therefore the answer is hakahal chayiv. V'kol kal v'kahal chayiv. Talmud Lomar hakahal. That's just a kahal. Pasuk says that it's talking about the community, and that is to tell me that even if 1 or 2 of the shvatim follow it, then each of the 1 or 2 shvatim are going to bring their own par ha'elam davar. Make sure whose opinion is that. Okay, good. Now, hakahal chayev, right? The community is now obligated. V'chol kahal v'kahal chayev. So each and every one of the communities in these circumstances is going to be bringing their own korban. Right, as we said, that's not Rabbi Meir's view, but we'll see this is Rabbi Yehuda's view. So, Ketzad, how does this work? Chatu shnei shvatim. If 2 shvatim do the avera, mevi'in shnei parim. They're going to bring 2 bulls. Chatu zayin. If 7 of them, now you've got the majority. Mevi'in zayin. Then they're going to bring 7. Ushar shvatim shelo chatu mevi'in al yedeim par. Then everybody else also has to bring, because now you're up to the majority. Once the majority tips, every shevet has to bring. Yadem par. Shafilu elu shalochatu mevi'in al yedei hachotin, because even the ones that didn't do the avera, they have to bring a korban for the ones that did.
But that's not fair to the people. That's not fair to the people who didn't do the avera.
We're all one people.
Am echad.
We're just like, that's unity. That's what it is. Lekach nemar, the pasuk says kahal. That's why it says we're a kahal. L'chayev called kahal the kahal, to tell us that every individual community, every shevet, has their own responsibility to bring a korban. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns it. Okay, and that's like we read in our Mishnah. Every shevet is bringing their own, and then if your shevet didn't do it, you have to bring anyway. Rabbi Shimon says, no, I don't agree. Zayin shvatim shechatu mevi'in zayin parim. 7 shvatim that they do the avera, they're going to bring 7 bulls. Ubeis in mevi'in al yedehan par, and Beis Din is going to bring 1 more. Shnemar lemata kahal v'nemar lemala kahal. Because we have two different places, a gzera shava on the word kahal. And it says the word kahal by the Parha Elam Davar, and then it says also the word kahal in the continuation of the Parha Elam Davar, where it says the makahal hamar lemala, the first kahal, is talking about based in im hakahal, based in and the community are making the mistake together, right? They ruled something and they were fooled by the ruling, based in and the kahal. Af kahal hamar lemata, also the word kahal, when they're doing the avera, means based in im hakahal, and they're bringing the korban, means based in with the community. The community brings one, so does based in. Okay. So that's Rabbi Shimon's perspective. Rabbi Meir says, Zayin Shvatim Shechatu. If 7 of the tribes do the Avera, based in Mevin al Yedeim Par, Vehain Pturim. Only based in brings it, nobody else. They're exempt. Why? Nemar Kahal Lamata v'Nemar Kahal Lamala. The word Kahal is written talking about the mistake that they made, and the word Kahal is written by the korban that they bring. Ma Kahal Amor Lamala, based in Velot Tzibur, just like the mistake was that based in made the ruling. Not the community, right? That's how he's interpreting it. Not like we just interpreted it before that was based in and the community. Now saying, no, based in made the mistake, not the community. Afkal Amar Lamata, also who brings the korban later below when it talks about the kahal bringing it, is based in Velot Tzibur. It's the based in, not the community.
Congregation.
Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer Mishmo, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, in the name of Rabbi Meir, right? Rabbi Meir says you need a majority in order for the based in to bring it. He says, Chet'o shisha shvatim vehem rubo shel kahal. If 6 of the shvatim do the avera, but they compromise the majority by numbers of Kahal Yisrael. Oh, Zayin, aval bisha ein rubo shel kahal. Or if 7 tribes do it, even if they don't represent the majority of the people, maybe in part, that's still enough to be able to bring a bull offering. One or the other. Okay, next. Amar Mar says, V'nod'ah hachatas v'lo shiyod'u hachotin. We said that they have to know there's the sin, not that they have to know that they sinned. It's critical that Beis Din knows what the avera they taught wrong was. Man Tana, who is this opinion that holds that it's critical when you're bringing a korban to know what your avera was? Some Rabbi Yehuda, Amarav, V'itema Rava. Some says Yehuda, Rav. Some says Rava. Delo Rabbi Eliezer. It's not like Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. It's not because we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Manavshach. If you're in a situation where you know you did an avera, you just don't know which one. Im chaylev acho chayev, nosar acho chayev. You don't know whether you ate forbidden fats, or you may have eaten leftover korban meat that's left over till the morning that needs to be burnt.
How do you not know what you avera you meat?
Because you ate the meat and you just don't know what it was. Now, either way, whichever one it was, you have to bring korban chatos. So, therefore, he says, you bring korban chatos. They don't have to know which one it is. Not a big deal. You know you did something. You bring korban chatos. You bring korban chatos. Ravashi says, Afila tem Rabbi Eliezer. No. Rabbi Eliezer even could be the one in our circumstance when it comes to the Beis Din who says the Beis Din needs to know. Right? Normally, he says by regular korban chatos, the person who's bringing it doesn't need to know. But here he might say that he does need to know. Because Shani Hacha, here it's different. Dichsiv, the pasuk says, Asher chatu aleha. Because the pasuk says very clearly that they did the sin upon it. So therefore, you have to know which sin it is that you did in order to be obligated. Well, Hasam Nami Dichsiv Asher chataba. Well, by the regular korban chatos, it also says that he did an avera with it, and he knows exactly should know exactly what it is. If you're interpreting it that way, so he says no. But that second pasuk, when talking about the individual korban, that's not telling me that you need to know the korban. You have to know the avera. Why? Because ahumi boile, we need it for something else. We need it for prat limis asek. We need to exempt a circumstance where somebody does the avera, not b'shogeg, but we call misasek. Misasek is the circumstance where you intend to do one thing and without thinking you do the prohibited action, that you do the prohibited item. Like the classic example that we've been saying, person goes down and he thinks he's picking something up from the ground, but instead he didn't realize that he was holding on to a rose that was attached to the ground and plucks it out, right? That's not shogeg in the sense that you didn't know that it was Shabbos or you didn't know that it was prohibited to pluck a flower, right? That's misasek. And that you don't bring a korban chatos for. How come? Because it says it has to be asher chata ba, right? He has to do the avera, and that doesn't count. But the pasuk asher chatu aleha is, which we're talking about the Parlam Davar, is telling us that you really do need to know the Avera. So despite the fact that Rabbi Eliezer says that normally you don't need to know exactly which Avera you did in order to bring Korban Chatos, even though everybody else says you do, you do need to know, Beis Din does need to know what the Avera is. So it is unanimous. Everybody feels that way. This is a good place to stop and have a wonderful night. My time at the Rabbi Yehuda is where we're going to pick up.